All right, everybody. Very nice to see everybody this morning on this Ruby Gates morning. Ruby Gates is a red tea, and we'll talk about red tea and black tea. I'm always so confused. But as we go through this, and by the end of this session, you'll know more about the difference between red and black. You'll know more than you ever want to know about theaflavins, and you'll know more about drought, stress, and what reaction it seems to cause in tea leaves. So these are all some of the things we're going to cover today. As usual, let's start off with the shop news. So what has happened in the shop this week? Well, the most important thing is we believe we've gotten our final order in, and that was on Monday afternoon. This is the Cliff teas and a few other assorted teas, but primarily the Cliff teas. And we're very happy to have them in the shop. It's going to take us a while to completely break down all the boxes. And we're working on that right now to break down the boxes and to really try and understand and make sure that what we think we ordered is what we got. So those will be some of the things we're working on this week. Now, for those of you who are tea members, you belong to the membership group, you should have received an email last week. But as usual, understudy is behind the 8 ball, and therefore you didn't receive that email. So let me tell you what should have been in that email that you will get sometime within the next 2 or 3 days. So for team members, all of you are entitled to 2 cups of free tea, any tea in the shop on the board in October. Oh, but there's more. You're also entitled to 2 free cups in November. Wow. And I wonder if there's a Christmas present. 2 free cups in December. Now, we'll work on the honor system because remembering that the understudy is too lazy to keep records, and even when he does keep records, many times incomplete, we'll rely on you to keep records and make sure that you're confining yourselves to the 2 free cups. So that's one of the benefits, additional benefits that you're receiving. So I wanted to announce that. Now, let's go ahead and get into, well, actually, there's one more thing I want to talk about in the setup here. And that is, we saw quite a few new and old customers we haven't seen in a long time, come through the shop this week. And we saw a number of new customers, and one of them I think is on the broadcast today. Hi, Kay. She's working on a project in Oaxaca in a cloud forest, dealing with or helping the indigenous peoples work with the land, with the traditional healing plants and mushrooms. And we had a fascinating conversation yesterday, and very happy to welcome her to the tea family. And I think we'll all be having a chance to see her and meet her as the weeks go by. So that was a very fun, unexpected pleasure yesterday. All right, so let's get into Ruby Gates and red tea. So I said by the end of this, you'll know the difference between red and black. Oh, wait a minute. That's not quite what I said. Red and black tea, because all of you already know the spectral difference between red and black. And you're probably wondering who's colorblind. Is it the British or is it the Chinese? Because the Chinese call heavily oxidated, and let's, get ourselves scientific this morning. Heavily oxidated between 80 and 95% oxidated, and we're talking about the tea leaves, versus nothing. It's the same tea leaf. In China, it's called red tea. And the British somehow managed to get red and black all mistranslated. And so they call it black tea. So in the West, what the Chinese call red tea. So you've got 1.8 billion people who call this fully oxidated or not fully, heavily oxidated tea, red tea. And then you have the rest who call it black tea. Here, obviously, we call it red tea because we follow the Chinese example. Why might this make a difference to you? And how might this cause confusion? So the Chinese have something that's truly called black tea, but that implies, actually really signifies fermented tea. So fermentation versus oxidation, is there a difference? You better believe there's a difference. And even though in scientific literature and popular literature, in tea shops around the world literature, you see those two terms seemingly used interchangeably. Sometimes some of the publications even forget oxidative. I think because oxidative has an X in it, so it's harder to remember to use it in the proper context. But oxidative is an enzymatic process. In other words, it's a chemical process that creates change in the tea leaf. Fermented is a microbial process where you've got bacteria, fungi, yeast, molds acting on the tea leaf to produce changes. They produce very different flavor and aroma changes. And that's why it's important for all of us to use the right terms. And that way there's no confusion. So that's the main difference between true red and true black. Remembering again, in the West, almost nobody uses red when they're talking about the heavily oxidated teas, but you will because you know better. All right, so that takes care of that. So let's move forward a little bit and talk about drought stress. Now, why in the world would I bring up drought stress? Well, as it turns out, this year, China had 11 straight, very unpleasant hot weeks throughout most of China. And this caused stress to many of the tea plants. Now, they've done very good research on the hybrids or the varietals, which are usually used for red teas. And what they discovered is that the catechins in those tea leaves actually removed some of the reactive oxygen species. Oh my God, using all these scientific terms, I could say anything and everybody would just nod their head, but this is not fair. Reactive oxygen species it occurs when you have cellular mechanisms. We all get it, but it usually, there's a certain range it should occur in. If you get too much, it becomes an attacker to your cells. It can damage your DNA. So therefore, there's a range it's supposed to be in. Well, the catechins in the tea leaves keep that in the right range when there's drought. And not only that, they change it if it's getting too much into aromatics and taste compounds. And therefore, the end result for red tea of drought stressed is it's going to be more flavorful. Is that all good news? Well, more flavor is always good news. So what's the bad news out of this? The bad news is when you have severe drought like this, the plants themselves, the bushes themselves, the trees themselves can get damaged. So there has been some damage. And what I would expect is, although the harvest to be very, very good in terms of the end result, especially if you have skilled farmers or skilled producers working the tea leaves, the actual volume could be less. So that's something to keep in mind about what's happened with this year's red tea. All right, so let's go through, before I run out of time, let's go through the basic processing of red tea, and let's talk about two Chinese words. And let's not introduce those Chinese words yet. Let's go through basic process, and then we're going to introduce Chinese words. You get your 2-word lesson today. All right, so the basic process is you got to go to the tea fields at the appropriate time. And in our case, we're only getting spring pick. Earlier is better. Why would that be? You have more than 2,000 chemical compounds, most of which science doesn't really know how they interact. The big ones, they know how they interact, but the ones, which is most of them, that are smaller or haven't been that researched, they still don't know how they interact. And in a minute, we'll talk about why they're trying to understand how they interact. So those 2,000 chemical reactions, chemicals within the plant are part of what is affected through processing. And the processing is the early processing, that is of the spring pick. You're getting all of those at their height, and therefore you get the best chance for the fullest and most interesting flavor. So that's the relationship between early pick and a later pick. You can pick all year round if you want to. A, you'll damage the plant if you overpick. B, when you pick later in the season and keep repetitively picking, the quality just isn't that good. The flavor isn't bright. I don't know about all of you, but I like bright, just like the colors. I want to be able to see those things actually in Technicolor. I want to be able to taste in Technicolor. I guess it's impossible to taste in Technicolor, but you get the point being made here. So you pick in the spring, and our picks, the Ruby Gate picks, are basically a bud and a leaf. Now, as this turns out, this is actually, for a red tea, not the normal pick. The normal pick is a bud and 3 or 4 leaves, because farmers are trying to get volume, and as they get volume, they get more money. But that's not technically correct. The more money really comes from the style of pick, doesn't it? If you pick a rarer pick, like a bud and a leaf, and it's early spring, are there as many leaves? In other words, this is a volume question. Are you going to get as much volume from that as if you wait till later spring and pick down the stem of the plant and pick 3 or 4 leaves? And the answer is no. Therefore, when you put that on market, once you're able to prove to the market, hey, this is something special. And you don't just prove it by telling the market, hey, this is a bud and leaf. This is something special. Pay 50 times more than late in the season. No, you can say anything you want, but you got to prove it. Well, how do you prove it? You prove it in terms of the eventual flavor that you get, the flavor and the aroma. And that's what drives these markets, whether it's in China or here. Once you're drinking premium tea, you don't care. Actually, you do care, but you don't care as much about the story as you do about the taste. I can tell you all sorts of stories. And in fact, some of the stories are actually quite entertaining. And maybe you might pay a little premium for an entertaining story, but you're not going to pay a big premium for an entertaining story. On the other hand, if you get a uniqueness in flavor, then the sky's the limit. Obviously, within reason, the sky's the limit. And that is how the tea market in China works. So you pick, you wither. So how do you wither? Well, it depends where you are. Most of the time, if it's not raining, you wither outside. But some of the farmers have these machines that are about as long as this counter, so probably 40 feet long. And these machines have holes in them about this size, and they're pumping air in them. And you have the machine full of leaves, and the leaves are jumping up and down, and they put it in a room where they control the temperature. So that's another way of withering. And both ways have validity. If you're old style and do it outside, there's another element strongly at play. If you're doing it inside, that element is less in play. So what is that element? It's fungal residue, microbial residue. So remember, these plants out in nature, they're all surrounded by microbial agents. And so as you pick them, in some places, they sterilize the leaves first before they go through a processing. So in India and Sri Lanka, they go through a sterilization process, and then they process. So what does that sterilization process do? It removes most of the microbial agents. We'll get back to that in a minute or in a second, because I want to talk about that specific act and how it relates to flavor. So in China, most of the factories, except the very largest producers, do not sterilize. So they get additional agents on the leaves. Well, let's see. Let me think about this a moment. When I'm at home, I like stuff that's washed, especially fresh fruit. Those berries I wash real hard, make sure they're real clean. And you're telling me we're not washing the tea leaves? So remembering that the tea leaves are going to go through several processes, including at the end, a heat application process that we call baking. So therefore, any unwanted or unnecessary microbial agents be destroyed through that process. But in the pre-bake applications, I should say, because the steps, they contribute to flavor enhancement. So that's why typically Chinese red tea has, especially if it's not exported to Kenya to be chopped up, typically that has more interesting and varied flavors because there's more elements involved. And again, most people don't talk about this because they don't really understand that this is an element of what's going on. So as you move the tea through the withering process, and one of you is thinking already, okay, withering process. Now, I know you're going to tell me how long that is. And the answer is no, I'm not. What I'll tell you is a typical range, but every farmer does it differently. So that range is typically at the low end, 8 hours, at the low end. At the high end, it tends to be around 14 hours. Sometimes that can go to a full day, though rarely. So what influences the farmer? And does the farmer do it the same way every year? And the answer, of course, would be no. Why? Because the terroir, the microclimes, are different every year. The microclimate behaviors, I should say, are different every year. Some years very damp, some years it rains, some years it's quite warm, some years it's dry. So the farmer is relying on the aroma attributes. And as the aroma attributes get to a certain stage, through experience, they know, oh, this is going to be good. I'm going to stop withering right here. And they know through the feel component. They get the leaves in their hand. You frequently see them reach their hand, whether it's outside or inside, and start, feeling up the leaves. And you're looking at that. What's he doing? Or what's she doing? They're trying to make a judgment about moisture content within the leaves. Why is this important? If you have a fully moistured leaf, in other words, no moisture has been, or very little has been lost, say only 10% from picking to the time you start to work with it is lost. What is going to happen to that leaf as you start processing? Because remember, your next step is rolling. It's going to tear and fall apart. Yes.
So one of the participants observes that the dry leaves are smaller than usual and they distinctly feel slippery and smoother to the touch. So I'm curious why that is, since we're talking about touch.
So one of the commentators has noted already something that I'm about to get to. In fact, now that you've noted it, maybe I should get to it, that the leaves are extremely small, they're smooth and slippery, and is that related to the touch that I'm talking about right now? And the answer is no, it's not related to the touch that I'm talking about right now. But you asked a great question, and it's a great segue to teach you Chinese. Because I said we're going to have two words today, Conggu and Gongfu. So Conggu, C-O-N-G-O-U, and then Gongfu, G-O-N-G-F-U, are the same thing. And what they indicate is a style of processing that originated, as best we know, in Hunan Province. Because remember, Fujian was really the home of red tea. When did red tea start in China? It started sometime in the 1700s, we believe. Now, if somebody is able to find a reference back to the 1600s and says, oh, you're wrong by 50 years or 60 years, that's okay, because it is possible that it started in individual farms before it ever got into the literature that there was really this style of tea that was being done. So, but the dates that we normally go with are around 1700, and certainly it was advanced by this time. And as the years went by, it was really driven out of Hunan Province. Later, let's not say later like that, by the 1700s, early 1700s, Anhui was starting to do a bit of the red tea, but it became hugely influential by around 1785 because you had a tea grower and a tea producer from Fujian move to Anhui and start using this Conggu or Gongfu style. So what is this style? This style is taking the leaves all the way through oxidation. And I won't skip those steps. It looks like I'm skipping a bunch of steps. But no, I'm going to come back and explain those in detail. But you get to the end, pre-bake. So pre-bake, after you've oxidized and say, oh, I've oxidized now, time for me to do something else. You reshape the leaves. Most producers don't do this. There are about 4 or 5 steps in this Gongfu style where they reshape the leaves, and it's an artistic, part of it is artistic, how you want the leaves to look, Another part is related to enhancing or bringing out certain flavors. They have little tools that they use. It's a very labor-intensive process. And generally speaking, if you're getting this style of tea, it means you're getting one of 3 grades. Now, let's be sure we understand the term grade, because grade in the Western context means, oh yeah, top grade. That's what I want. Give me the best stuff. Best stuff needs a definition, doesn't it? So if you're talking about best stuff, including the aesthetics, including flavor, including aroma, okay, you can call special grade that best stuff, because that's the #1 grade. They actually have 11 grades. 10 is what people normally fall in the habit of thinking about, because, oh, 1st grade, 10th grade. 10th grade is machine fully processed. The leaves aren't whole. Top grade, what is top grade again? It's not #1. It's special grade and then #1. So if you're looking for the best, you know, and a tea purveyor says, yeah, I have 1st grade stuff, you respond, how about some special grade stuff? And let's see what they pull out. Because the special grade has gone through all the steps, and all of this is hand done. That's what makes it special grade. In fact, the first 3 levels of grades is all hand done. They do fewer of the post-oxidation steps as you go down the list. By the time you get to grade 4 or 5, they don't do any of those. Why? Because it costs money. It takes people of skill. I can't just walk in there, hey, I'm going to make these pretty, and I'm sure that if I make this move or that move, you know, it's going to taste a little different. That's a fail. The people who belong to that workshop, generally speaking, have 25 plus years of experience. It takes that long to really get into the rhythm of how to efficiently use these small tools and achieve the end result. So that's what's happened with Ruby Gates. So, oh my God, no wonder the tea master has been signaling, I am so thirsty. She has a signal for I am so thirsty, which means I'm supposed to get off talking. And you know, she signaled several times, but I was so into this and I had to answer your questions that we've come this far. So without further ado, let me bring the thirsty numinous tea master into the picture so she can demonstrate how to brew Ruby Gates, and then you can brew with her afterwards.
Thank you.
Sure.
Today, so yeah, we do Hong Cha. It's red tea, so from the Hunan. So
Participants confirm that they are thirsty as well. So, yeah.
Sorry about that.
yeah, it's my space, yeah. So people know what I like, yeah. So right now, so I do.
So the usual tableau. Oh, we have a monstrous tea toy and a couple tea toys, one monstrous and one smaller, 3 cups. Why does the tea master have 3 cups out there? It's a way to dissipate the steam and cool the water faster than if you just have 2 cups. If you have 2 cups and that's all you have, that's okay too. Does not matter. This is just a way for us to speed it up. So nothing more than that. And again, if you have 2, that's fine. And if you bring your water to 175 and just want to use it at 175, you don't want to play with the water and go through this, that's okay also. However, what's the benefit of going through this? Remembering, of course, that we all like bright flavors. And the more you dissipate the steam, the brighter the flavor is going to be. And with Brewing food teas, and this belongs to that category, even though it's not from Fujian, it does belong to this category. They typically like less heat, less steam. All right, so you notice that she's dissipating the water. Actually dissipating the steam. This is always such a fun step. Sometimes she's able to go very high and keep all that water in the same cup. Every time I do this, I have water everywhere. So it's fun to watch an expert, not fun to have water everywhere. All right, she gets out bag number 2, which is Ruby Gates. You're not doing this yet. She puts it in the heated cup. And remember, as we heat this cup, the other thing we're doing is waking up the leaves. And now we get to play. I guess it's not playing, but it seems like playing. We shake the leaves. We smell. Got to make sure that this is really Ruby Gates. Dissipates the heat one more time. And then she pours on the side of the glass. You try not to pour directly on the leaves. And again, all of these details add to a brightness. If you don't have the time or you don't have the tools to do this, don't worry about it. You're still going to have a very fine cup of tea. So we set the timer for 4 minutes, which I've just hit. All right, and we let this do its work. In the meantime, we also heat up the recipient cup because we, especially with red tea, we love to have that recipient cup warm. All right, and so I'm still in the midst of process. I've only gotten through withering. I better talk a little faster so I can get through this whole process. So after withering, what do? We roll. In the old days, that all used to be done by hand. Now, very few farmers do it by hand because it's labor intensive. It's a lot of work. It takes a long time, and they've got a machine which rotates as if it's a corkscrew that's rotating, and they can control the pressure on the leaves as they're rotating. So they usually start off with a lighter pressure, and then they tighten a button and increase the pressure, and then lighten it up. So they go through this routine of heavier, lighter, medium, and every farmer does it slightly differently, again, through experience and through an understanding of what their particular understanding of what an end result is going to be during a certain cycle of tightening it or loosening it. By the time this stuff starts to come out of the bottom of this machine, it's all agglomerated. Love these large words. I have to use at least 1 or 2 every session. So really what that means is a darn sticky, gooey mess. What else is it? It's hot. So they go through, in quotes, a de-agglomeration. In other words, kind of pull it apart because they want to cool it down a little bit. And they also want to separate the leaves so that they don't all adhere to one another. Then what do? They pile the stuff. Right. Like a garbage pile. Oh no, this is a room that's got a surface, usually a bamboo, but sometimes a metal surface. And they stack it up on top of each other, leaves on top of each other, anywhere from about 4 inches high up to, at the most I've ever seen is about a foot high. And when you do that and you control the temperature in the room, you produce a degree of oxidation, either a faster or slower. So what controls faster or slower? Temperature. Oxidation occurs in a bell curve. So at 88, 89 degrees, fastest oxidation. At 32, you essentially eliminate oxidation. You don't eliminate, but you make it just above zero. At 150, you essentially eliminate. Again, you don't eliminate, it's occurring, but very, very slowly. And that, by the way, is why you bake at the end. You bake at the end to seal off any further oxidation. All right, timer has gone off. You separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Take a look at that color. In a minute, yours should look like that. So what am I going to do first? I'm going to smell these leaves. 175 degrees sniff. Remember, you can get your nose a little bit further down than if this is an oolong. Oh my gosh. Distinctive. You're going to tell me what it is. Yes.
Is the email to us says that Ruby Gates is from Hunan, but is it
Yes.
really from Fujian?
Oh, no. I'm glad that this commentator asked this question, because knowing the understudy makes mistakes just about every 10 minutes, it's good to ask this question. So the question is, have I confused Hunan and Fujian? And the answer is no. Fujian, I mentioned that as the inventor of the Kung Fu process. Hunan took it up in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and started to use it for this tea. This is truly Hunan tea. And it should look this color when you do it. So one of the things you're going to notice right away about this color, in fact, you know what? You're going to tell me what you notice about this color. I don't know why I'm telling you this. We're going to enter the quality arena now, and we're going to test for mouthfeel. We're going to test for astringency, aftertaste, and then energetics. Now, for those of you who are new on the broadcast, energetics relates to how you feel after drinking the tea. So let's go ahead and drink some. Okay, I have my first sip in. I'm beginning to get an appreciation of what this is. I'm going to take a second sip and confirm that. And by the way, you're not doing this yet. I seem to have indicated that you were doing this. Not yet. You will in a second. Okay, I have a pretty good idea of what I think I'm feeling in terms of mouthfeel, in terms of energetics. I have a reaction already in terms of energetics. It's your turn to brew with the tea master now. Make sure your timer is set for 4 minutes. And you start to draw your water. Now, when you're heating a cup, you can use any temperature of water up to 212. However, by and large, most of you have one kettle. So you're going to have 175 degree, and that's fine to use in terms of heating the cup. Going to dissipate the steam. Actually, you haven't dissipated the steam yet because she actually used 200 degree water in that. Now she's drawing to 175, and you'll see her dissipate the heat, the steam. My favorite part, playing with the water. Oh, she's not playing with the water. So remembering that all of this has a purpose. It's not accidental. You're going to get best flavors using this technique. And best flavors is a combination of techniques of which we've talked about. So you use the ones that you're comfortable using, and don't stress over, oh gosh, you know, why don't I just set my water for 170 or 172 and just do it that way? You can. You can. It won't be as bright, but it'll still be very good. So you get bag number 2, Ruby Gates. You put it in the heated cup. You shake it. And then you pour on the side. Then you set your timer for 4 minutes and you start it. All right, so we've gotten through the basic process of doing red teas. All red teas that aren't in some sort of experimental production mode go through these processes. Now, why do I mention experimental production? Because China, India, Kenya, they're all experimenting with various modes to see if they can enhance flavors. So they're trying a few different things, including freezing the tea leaves. I mean, there's a whole range of things that are being done in scientific institutes. So eventually, one of these methodologies may become prevalent, but currently what I've walked you through is what the majority of Chinese red tea undergoes. By the way, in the West, 78% of tea drinkers, roughly 78% of tea drinkers drink red tea. That is their tea of choice. Then there's another 20% that drink green tea, and then the majority of the rest is oolong teas. And then you have individual, much smaller numbers for the whites and the yellows, and even the fully fermented teas. So this gives you, from a worldwide perspective, why red tea to China is so important, because it's an export product. But this is really for import consumption. So the best teas, the best red teas, the earliest spring picks, the Tuji, that is special grade, from all the red teas, by and large, is really meant for China. So Chimanil, famous base of English breakfast, the Tuji almost never leaves China. It's basically in China for consumption in China, and Chinese aficionados, tea aficionados, end up loving this. All right, so this morning while all of you were just waking up, I got it together, and I thank you, Marcia, for sending me this article about theaflavins. I was going to talk about theaflavins quite a lot this morning until I read this article and found out that it's a really, really good summary. So it's in your emails, by the way, if you haven't checked your emails. A really good summary of the benefits, the known benefits of theaflavins. Theaflavins, I remind you, is a derivative of catechins. A derivative. What, they work in the laboratory and pull it out? Oh no. As you pile the tea, the catechins through the oxidation process first become theaflavins. Theaflavins, as they accumulate, they undergo further oxidation, and some of them become theorubicins. Theaflavins are the orange. They produce the orange-like color in tea. Theorubicins produces the red color in tea. They have different health benefits. Very little is understood about theorubicins in terms of health benefits. Theaflavins, on the other hand, a lot of information across the board in terms of health benefits. So I urge you to look at that article because it's one of the best summaries of that I've seen. Your timer has gone off, and you're going to separate tea leaves from the tea liquid.
This is an easy cup of tea to drink. The aroma is lovely and slightly fruity and sweet. The flavor is grassy and the mouthfeel is juicy.
Lovely cup of tea to drink. Aroma is sweet. Flavor is slightly grassy.
Actually, so an easy cup of tea to drink, but the aroma is lovely, and slightly fruity and sweet.
Slightly fruity and sweet.
Yeah, and the flavor is grassy. Mouth feels juicy. That's a big comment.
Okay. Flavor grassy and mouth feel juicy. Thank you for that clarification. And that clarification actually, as it turns out, is really important. Why is it important? Because the commentator ended on a spot I would start. This is juicy. Right away, you feel that this has got a lot of things going on with it. And the first thing from the aroma that I detected was that sweet, fruity flavor, almost like an apple flavor. Aroma. A freshly cut up apple. That aroma. Yes.
The aroma of dry leaves was vegetal with hints of sweetness. And the wet leaves give a little sense of cinnamon.
Oh, interesting. Okay. The dry leaves aroma is very vegetal with just the slightest hint of sweetness. The wet leaves, for this commentator, have a hint of, the commentator uses cinnamon. I'm going to generalize that. There's a spiciness to this. And I love the fact that you picked that up because this is a true nice winter tea because you do have that hint of cinnamon / spicy, which you associate with winter, including a natural sweetness, which isn't overly sweet. So you know right away that this is not a Hunan red because Hunan reds, we remember, they lead with sweetness many times.
This commenter also noted that the color was much lighter than the other reds. This is a light golden amber, and the taste was smooth, bright honey flavor, and all in all reminded her of a baked sweet potato. Very easy on the tongue, full mouth flavor, very light astringency.
So the taste was very full, reminding this commentator of a baked sweet potato. I want to stop right there before I touch the rest of this comment. Love this comparison. And in China, they would understand what you said right away because frequently this type of flavor in China is called out as hints of sweet potato. And the fact that you augmented it by calling it out as baked sweet potato also suggested that the aroma has that sweetness that a baked sweet potato. What's the rest of that comment again? I'm sorry.
Easy on the tongue,
I can
full
see.
mouth flavor or feel with a light astringency.
Okay, great. Light astringency, full mouth flavor, and easy to drink. Did I catch that?
Yeah.
Okay, so great comment on this, and I would agree with all aspects of this. It is very full mouth, it's very juicy, it has that hint of sweet potato, and there just is a nice sweetness, but it's not a cloying sweetness, it's not a foot forward sweetness, it's part and parcel of this whole cup of tea.
Another commentator says this is even gentler than New Path, and fruity but grounded with some grass and earth, really joyful energetics. So although, you know, Aggie's cracking me up today, fellow commentator, so maybe it's her.
Let's start with the end of this. Joyful energetics. Love this comment. And I invite all of you to comment on the energetics because for me, I catch what is meant by that joyful energetics, but some of you may want to expand because there's another element to that energetics. And commentator talks about, I need you to go through that one more time.
Absolutely. So she compared it to New Path,
Oh,
different
that's right.
tea that we tried, but said it's really grounded with some grass and some earth.
I love this part of the comment because this is what tells you that this is so much more complex. And this is why I like that part of the comment because, again, if it were sweet foot leading, you wouldn't be talking about the grass and the earthiness and the other things going on with this. Gentler than the New Paths. Last week, we were all astounded how gentle and smooth New Paths was. This, for this commentator, is even gentler. And without question, all the elements in this hit the right note, so to speak. There's nothing out of place. And that's what's really, really interesting and nice about this tea. And in general, if I were to make a generalization, special grade Gongfu tea aims for this mouthfeel, always aims for this. The flavoring can be different, but it aims for that combination where you capture the whole essence of the leaf. That's how you know. So asking yourselves, well, what should I take away from today's session about special grade? This is precisely what you should take away. And all of you have hit this on the head. So you all are very qualified to go in to any tea purveyor. Hey, give me your special grade.
Another tea friend says that with this aroma and flavor, it makes him eager to learn what's going on inside the ruby gates.
Ah, so this particular commentator says, with the wonderfulness of this tea and the interestingness and the mix of flavor and aroma and mouthfeel, what in the world is going on within the ruby gates?
Another taster found that it has a deep sweetness, like in the way that a medjool date is sweet, and he just had a moment where he started thinking about cookies as the taste was washing over him.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So a deep sweetness, much like a medjool date, and then as this commentator was further evaluating, almost felt like a cookie washing over him. And I get that because you all have hinted in several aspects about this. So one of the aspects was hints of spiciness / cinnamon. One of the aspects was hints, defined hints of sweet potato. And then another comment was the fullness of it. So that's why this commentator just didn't say, oh, just a slight hint of cooking. No, it's a fullness of total flavor. And I get that.
And on the spiciness, another taster says as she drinks deeper into the cup, she noticed the spiciness lingers in the mouth.
Great comment. So the spiciness isn't a one-time firecracker. It lingers in the mouth. And this also suggests something else about the mouth quality of this. So the mouth quality, nobody said it yet, but there is a coating quality to this tea. I wouldn't necessarily call it viscid, but I would call it coating and lasting. And even as I'm talking to you, talking more than drinking, I still have the flavor of this tea in my mouth.
Another taster says right away she feels the energetics of the tea, which is grounding and healing.
The energetics for this commentator is grounding and healing. So without question, this is a calming, grounding tea. And for some of you, you'll find it healing, particularly in the stomach from the Chinese perspective, Chinese medicinal perspective. They would call this absolutely healing for the digestive tract.
What flavors do you get out of this cup?
So the main flavors, so this is a question about what flavors I get. So the main flavors that I get out of this are, again, the apple with the spiciness. I get that full-mouthedness out of this. And the other thing is I get almost what I would call a pure tea taste. So while there's sweetness and sweet potato, that's not what stands on top for me. What stands on top for me is that pure tea taste. Great question.
And another commentator says he can see accept the coming of the fall as he sips this tea and while looking out the window.
Oh, I love this comment. So this commentator actually says two things: that it helps this commentator accept the coming of fall, but the implication also is that this is a tea you should be drinking in the fall. And absolutely on the money. You should be drinking this in fall. And again, from a Chinese medicinal point of view, they will tell you as it gets colder and colder, you should be drinking more and more red tea. Why do they say this? Because it stimulates blood flow. So again, for me, in terms of energetics, I feel it in my hands, I feel it in my feet, I feel warmth coming out of this.
Another taster says she detects some aftertaste of mineral flavor with some astringency, which then dissipates, leaving a freshness and a fullness in the mouth.
Oh, that's a great comment. An aftertaste of mineralness at the beginning, and then a fullness and freshness of flavor at the end. And I like this, the fullness and fresher. I like this better than what I said, because I said coating the mouth. This commentator talked about a fullness, a leftover fullness in the mouth. Love that comment. And a freshness of it.
Any suggested food pairings?
Suggested food pairings. So this would be the type of tea that you could safely serve under two circumstances. My favorite circumstance is if you had an early enough dinner. In other words, everybody eats at 7 o'clock, all done eating by 8:30, and you're thinking, Okay. I can't do coffee, but I want a little pick me up because we're going to have pleasant conversation. It's going to be just a nice couple hours. This is a perfect time. Actually, I didn't answer your question. I realized I didn't answer your question at all. I gave you timing rather than the pairing. Okay, so let's back up because you want a food pairing. So with this, I would serve more vegetables than meat. So whatever you're going to serve for the dinner, it should be vegetable heavy and meat light. This, well, there's two aspects to this. One is whatever you serve, if there's anything which could cause excitedness of the digestive tract, this will be very helpful in getting it back in order. So that, and again, that didn't sound like a specific food pairing, but I hope that that got you close enough, because I think for me, this is more a feeling tea than it is, okay, I want this flavor with that flavor. That's not what this one is about. It's more, I want this relaxed feeling in my gut.
Taster says he's getting a taste sensation that's similar to what a twisted orange peel gives in a cocktail.
Oh, I love this comparison. So in cocktails, for those of you who drink alcoholic beverages, sometimes they put a twisted orange peel in it, or they twist an orange peel, put it in. And the commentator says it's almost like there's an orange peel that's been twisted in the tea. Love the comment.
Speaking of timing of tea, I seem to recall having a red tea about an hour before bed and then being unable to sleep. Where does red tea fall again in the hierarchy of tea caffeine?
Okay, so this is a very complicated question. It sounds simple because the commentator says, well, I've had red tea before in the evening and then I haven't been able to sleep. You know, what's going on here? What's the caffeine content? Now, I could answer the question as it's asked, and you'll end up believing a certain thing. But let me answer the intent of the question instead. Is it what in tea might make it more stimulative and cause you to lose sleep? First off, there's less L-theanine in the red tea. So that's one thing. The second is there's theophylline in the tea. Theophylline is also a stimulant. And so therefore, for some people, it's just like the people who can't eat chocolate after dinner, because they eat chocolate and then they sit there counting the elephants and where's my sleep? Same thing with this. You can have a reaction, and does that mean everybody has the same reaction? No, I can drink this after dinner if it's early enough, and that's why I said an early dinner where you have another couple hours, and be okay with this. But normally, I wouldn't serve this and go straight to bed, because for me, it would probably keep me awake a slight amount of time.
What are the other two grades called that make up the top three grades? So we have special grade, and then what are the next two called?
First grade and second grade.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's in an order, and I just didn't want you to be fooled, because usually here we think of first grade. Oh, I want the first grade. No, you don't. You want the special grade.
Lots of trichomes at the bottom of the cup.
Yeah, so the commentator notes, oh, and I see them in my cup too. Wow, that means we all made it the correct way. Lots of trichomes. And remembering that trichomes, for those of you who are newer on the broadcast, are the little hairs that come from the leaf. What are those hairs? Those hairs are full of polyphenols, and the polyphenols act as a pesticide. It's not a pesticide, but it acts to defend the plant against unwanted pests.
And in the human body, what does it do?
Trichomes in the human body give it more polyphenols. Polyphenols in general can act as several different ways. And the article on theaflavins talks about that, but it can be anti-cancerous, anti-tumor, or boost your immune system. It can be antimicrobial. Bunch of good things can happen with the polyphenols. And by the way, I think I failed to mention something earlier. And I want to make sure we don't leave without a full explanation. You know, you gotta have the right dongle so you can put in the right, cords to that. And one of the cords that's missing was I talked about catechins converting to theaflavins and thearubicins, right? What is theaflavin and what is thearubicin? They are polyphenols. So it's one polyphenol converting into another polyphenol. That's why when you hear the term polyphenol applied to tea, you really have to understand what modality of tea to know what type of catechin is most prevalent. Does this mean there are no catechins in red tea? No, there are few catechins compared to green tea. Green tea is all about EGCG, EGCE, CG, I don't know. It's about all that E alphabet. You get down to the red teas, it's all about the theas, thearubicins, theasinensis, theaflavins. That's what you get for the polyphenols. But you haven't eliminated every single catechin because it's a conversion process. You've changed most of them. So that's the full story of it. All right. So, oh my gosh, red tea seems to make me overstimulated and therefore overtalked. We went through a lot of things today. The one thing we didn't get through, but I promise to get to it next week when we do the red tea called healing, is what the Chinese science academies is talking about in relationship to tea and health, because they have this fascinating vision of how tea is affecting humans. And some of you may have seen a comparison between tea and coffee. The more I look at how the Chinese are approaching this, the more I think it is not valid, that comparison. Okay, let me not use the word not valid. Of course, the way it was sliced, it's completely valid, but it was sliced. And my point is, you need a fuller picture. And once you get a fuller picture, we'll talk about this next week, you'll get more of these details and then you'll feel more comfortable. As usual, it's almost like I'm not needed because all of you are so excellent at entering the quality arena, identifying the aromas and the flavors and the interactions. I learned probably more from you than you learn from me. At any rate, it's very fun to be with all of you. And your instructions for this week, should you choose to accept them, are to stay healthy and be ready for healing next Saturday. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.